So, hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Schooled In. My name is John Lunn, aka Jonnychipz, and in this video series, we take a deeper dive into some awesome cloud technology areas. I'll be joined by a fantastic person from out in that tech community who've kindly taken their time out of their day to come and school me in a particular tech topic. So, whether you're watching this on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, or LinkedIn, thanks so much for tuning in. It's really appreciated. Please do take part in the chat below. Drop us a comment, a like, and a subscribe. That would be absolutely awesome. Okay, so over the years, transitioning to a cloud platform has been met with a variety of approaches and lessons learned, which has led to Microsoft developing and curating all of the great collateral that makes up the cloud adoption framework. And part of that adoption framework encompasses the concepts of Azure landing zones. So in order to set up and configure your cloud platform with all the required security, governance, policy, and logging capabilities and much more that your organization may require. So together with the rise of infrastructure as code, the development of new languages like Bicep is enabling us to deploy those landing zones and configurations in a scalable and repeatable fashion to aid organizations to deploy to best practice and have those scalable solutions in the cloud. So I'm super thrilled to be joined today by Senior Cloud Solutions Architect, Mr. Jack Tracey, who today is going to school me in Azure landing zones with Bicep. Hello there, Jack. How you doing? Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, hey John, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, getting there. It's getting there slowly, I think. I was saying just before the recording, it's just gone through the roof work at the moment. But all good, buddy. How's things your side? Been busy, I see.
Yeah, absolutely. Microsoft is busy as always. There's never a dull day. The Tetris calendar is definitely enabled at the moment.
Got you.
But yeah, it's all good. I'd rather be busy than not, right?
No, well, absolutely. Makes those days fly by as they do anyway. But it's all good. Well, look, Jack, you've been an awesome guest with me before on In Conversation With. Thanks so much for reaching out and agreeing to do an episode on a particular area I know you're heavily involved with from a work perspective at the moment, and Azure landing zones. And it's cool to see the developments that have gone on with helping businesses kind of deploy those landing zones in that scalable and repeatable manner. So, I mean, we've got a great area to run through. And I know you're going to school me in this new concept now that has been written in Bicep. But I guess before we jump in, do you want to set the scene for what we're about to talk through, Jack, and where we're going to go?
Yeah, 100%. So again, thanks for having me on, John. It's great to be back and keep up the great community stuff. I'm certainly a subscriber and a tune in. So yeah, believe me, this gets a lot of visibility. So please keep it up. I think from today, what we're going to talk about is Azure landing zones, as you rightly introduced at the beginning there. And as you say, it's part of the cloud adoption framework. Customers have always struggled with what does our landing zone look like. There's 30 different opinions from 50 different people, and everybody gets confused. Is this one the right one for me? Is this one the right for me? So what we did as part of my team inside of Microsoft was go, hold on, let's just step back. And we obviously, I think you might have remembered the virtual data center construct before VDC. That existed a long time ago. That was something that was created before I joined the team that I'm in, but with people that also helped design Azure landing zones or enterprise scale, right? So there's the first thing to call out. If you've heard of enterprise scale, it is now called Azure landing zones the Azure landing zones architecture has adopted enterprise scale.
Okay, right. Okay, I didn't know that actually, Jack. So that's a cool thing. So you kind of internally in Microsoft and obviously on the website, that's have you deprecated the enterprise scale terminology? Or
yeah, you'll still see enterprise scale here and there. Certainly in sort of the Terraform module, it's still called CAF enterprise scale, and there's still start with enterprise scale buried in some of the table of contents on the left hand side of the documents. It's a gradual thing, right? I think we wanted to do it in a graceful way, that not just a complete rename and it happens and everybody wakes up and is like, whoa, what's gone on here? Where's enterprise scale gone? So we tried to do it gradually, but it's also been a big piece of work internally and with our partners and the customers to start, testing out the enterprise scale architecture to make sure that it really is what we believe it is, and a best practice architecture for scalable, secured, governed platform environments in Azure. And now it's almost it's leveled up, right? It's gone from being a teenager to being an adult. We know that it's field tested. It's everybody internally in Microsoft is aligned, and it's the one landing zones architecture that we all align to internally at Microsoft. So now we can feel confident in saying this is the Azure landing zone, right? It's not another opinionated architecture. It is the architecture that we all believe that our customers should aim for as a North Star. And that was its code name internally before it was called Enterprise Scale.
Fair enough. And it's been great. You know, I've used it myself with customers that I've worked with. You're right. The way you describe it, there's always a million and one different opinions and different ways of doing things. And look, I guess that's not the point with Enterprise. Well, with the Azure landing zones concept, is that it's meant, I guess, to be that platform that you can go and deploy and configure to your own ends. Now, maybe we'll talk about this now, but we know that we've got the Terraform equivalent to what I think we're about to talk around with Bicep.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we don't need to go into it in great detail at the moment, but I guess early doors with this video is just starting off. Personally, I've used the Terraform equivalents with the landing zone concepts there, so I'm really looking forward to seeing how that's been worked out and coded in Bicep. But I guess is that an important point to maybe kick off with, that there are multiple ways that we can deploy landing zones?
Absolutely, and I think it's great to hear that you've used the Terraform module. That'll make a couple of my colleagues very happy. And hopefully, only yesterday, right, we released version 2 of the Terraform module with some big updates around virtual WAN support and stuff like that. So, very active and a very vibrant community on the Terraform module. And, again, please feel free, everybody in the community, to give it a go, raise issues, let us know feature requests. We really do listen. But yeah, absolutely, John. Stepping back to your question, we do have 3 implementation options today for the Azure landing zones architecture. So we have the Terraform modules you've rightly called out for those customers that want a generic Terraform module that is very aligned to the Terraform ethos of passing a set of input variables to a module, and it spits out X amount of resources and configures them in a way. So that's our Terraform module. We also have the Azure Landing Zones Bicep repository now, with a set of Bicep modules that helps you deploy the Azure Landing Zones architecture. And then we have the original option that we provided on day one when we released Enterprise Scale, which is the now known as the Azure Landing Zones Accelerator. But some people may refer to it as the portal experience, right? So you click the Deploy to Azure button, and you get a nice portal experience that you fill in a couple of parameters, you check a couple of radio box buttons, you set some sliders, and at the end of it, you hit deploy, and you get the architecture, all your networking, your management groups, subscriptions, policies. It's almost like the easy button, right? I think somebody internally explained it to me as Microsoft has to have a button for everything we deploy. So that's our version of a button to deploy everything with.
But that's the one, the button deployment is the one where we've got those multiple different scenarios, with different kind of business types that we could have.
Correct.
Small or, that's it. I've seen those as well. So, in fact, I think that's how I started to learn about landing zones, of course, is go and deploy one and jump in. So maybe we'll start there, Jack. I mean, should we start at the beginning with maybe explaining the concept of the landing zone and jump straight in if you're good with that?
Let's go for it. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Let's do that then.
All right, so in true Blue Peter style, here's the Azure Landing Zones CAF documentation page. And as you can see, rightfully, John, like you called out, right, it's part of the Cloud Adoption Framework, and it's under the Ready pillar. So obviously these other parts, your adoption journey, your strategy, your plan, absolutely should be things that you do before you get to the Ready stage, because that helps you set up, like, what teams do I need, profiles, what use cases are we going to do, why are we moving to the cloud, how much is it going to cost, all of those sort of questions is answered in those earliest phases of the Cloud Adoption Framework. But when you've made all those decisions and you're aligned internally in your business, then you get to the Ready stage, right? And you need to deploy your foundations, right? And we always talk about this internally around building foundations for houses or bridges or skyscrapers. You need strong foundations to be able to build those things so that they last forever and they put up with whatever you're going to throw at them. Azure landing zones can be compared to that very similarly, right? You need to put in your governance, your networking, your security posture in place before you go and migrate all of your workloads into new subscriptions into those. So you do a lift and shift or build a net new Kubernetes application, anything like that. You need to have strong foundations to ensure that they're going to be governed, secured, and follow your best practices as we recommend from Microsoft, but also as your business requires, right? You might have PCI compliance, you might have UK NHS official, there's lots of different regulatory compliance frameworks out there. This is getting you ready to set up to be able to apply those guardrails at scale and, basically let your developers go wild and accelerate your business and give them the autonomy whilst they're being controlled and guarded from doing the things that you absolutely do not want to let them be doing.
Makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good idea just to recap that for those that maybe aren't familiar with what that landing zone concept is. So, yeah, it makes sense, Jack.
Yeah, so as we talk here, we're at a landing zone, and I think the term landing zone itself can be quite confusing. We're working on actually, making some updates to this page, so look out for those in the coming weeks and months. But a landing zone, really, in Azure landing zone terms, is a subscription, right? That is a landing zone, non-plural. When we talk about Azure landing zones, we actually scroll down here, and we'll get into the Azure landing zones conceptual architecture, and you see this, massive diagram that we don't want people to get scared of, right? There's a lot in here, but I think you need to break it down. And it's a conceptual architecture, right? So it's not everything all in one go. You can take pieces of this and do it in the stages that you want to do it in. But this is what we're saying, that every customer, as a sort of a North Star, should be aiming for in terms of, if you're after Microsoft best practice about how your Azure environment should look from a platform perspective, this is it, right? And that's one of the exam questions that we always used to get asked, what's Microsoft best practice? And you probably get asked in your job, right? What's best practice?
Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? With best practice, it's in the term now, Jack. Current recommended architecture. Didn't we move away from best practice?
So well, if I did, I didn't get the memo, John. So
no, it was always one of those jokes that best practice today is different to tomorrow. But
no, absolutely.
With landing zones, this is like you say, the North Star, the guiding principle. Look, it should look something like this. Now, it doesn't have to be exact.
Exactly.
I mean, straight off the bat, the first thing that always comes up, the first question is, well, I don't want to call my management groups those names. I don't want a platform or a landing zone or, a corp or online. Corp or online is normally the one that, well, that's American. It's an American term, corp, not, So I guess we can talk about those as we start going through the modules and whether there's any good or bad points that we can bring out or work in progress bits. But yeah.
But, right at its heart, I think if we were to break Azure landing zones down to what it really is and what we're really trying to say, it's all around your management group hierarchy that enables you to assign policies, RBAC, at a scalable level, and also at a level where your application teams, that be these landing zones beneath your subscriptions, don't have access to amend or play with, right? So you're building that segregation between platform teams and application teams, where you can feel safe in giving a subscription to an application team going, you go build your application, you know it best, you know what the architecture should be, but we're going to control things from a policy perspective that we're assigned at management groups to ensure that, you do things like you make sure you enable private endpoints on PaaS services, or you make sure you enable HTTPS on web apps, or you enable Azure Defender on your subscriptions. And then in certain cases, like that Azure Defender one, or sorry, Microsoft Defender, the renames are still catching up with me.
Yeah.
That if they forget to enable that on their subscription, what we'll do as part of the platform and a policy assignment using deploy if not exists, we'll actually go and enable that based on what you configure as the policy assignment, and it will set it up for them so that, yes, they may have forgotten, but within 15 minutes, we're going to go and enable it anyway for them, so that we're keeping them in compliance and helping them remain compliant without them really having to do much.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, Jack. Yeah, got you.
So, and I just want to touch on one point, like corporate online is a great point. And what I would say is there's a load of design areas here. We have a ton of documentation around environmental design areas and compliance design areas. I highly recommend everybody, if you've not seen it before, we'll leave some links somewhere that you can go and find this. Or you can go to aka.ms/ALZ and you'll get to this page. And then go through these design areas. But if you go into, for example, the resource organization design area and go into management groups, you really should understand the reasons for these management groups before we think about changing them and the why. And if you go all the way through these recommendations, you'll get down to this section that says the management groups in the Azure Landing Zone Accelerator, and we detail what each of them are intended to be used for. So that's quite a nice thing for you to be able to understand what's going on. And also a really hot off the press document is this little note that we've got down here. And exactly that point you called out, John, right? The default corporate online management groups, they're a good starting point, right? They may fit, and maybe once you understand what they're for, using the table above, you may go, do you know what? That's cool. And it's just semantics, and we're cool with that. Or if you go, actually, we need to tailor this, we need to change some bits here. I actually authored this document recently with the team, and there's now a new document called Tailoring the Azure Landing Zone Architecture to Meet Your Requirements. And we talk about where it's safe to customize, understand what a landing zone archetype truly is in the way we designed it. So sort of sharing how we designed this and built it. And then we talk around, these are what is built in today, and these are some scenarios you might want to tailor the architecture for. And we circle these two areas as the safe places to customize the architecture. And we go through an example for each. So one for your application landing zones, which will be the bit in blue here. And we go through another area of the platform, which would be the bit in yellow above. So, you might want a separate security management group for a particular security requirement. This is how to do it, this is how to create it. And, this is what it could look like, right? So we're trying to educate customers on, it's not a fixed architecture, but there's certainly things that you should do and shouldn't do in it. And then as, per Azure landing zone style, we have the points to consider at the bottom, which is, these are the things you really should consider before tailoring, and the do's and don'ts, effectively.
I mean, it's great to point that out, Jack, to be honest, because I think they're, obviously, like you say, these are only fairly recently authored documents, so I've not actually seen these. Absolutely. But I'll be reading these through now, because I know, like from my experience, especially when, deploying them either manually to a point or using the Terraform modules in the past, then they're the kind of typical, it's always naming conventions. Yeah, naming conventions is the bane of our lives, I think, but because every company's got a different naming convention. So
Absolutely.
of course they have. So that's great points there, Jack. And I'll be taking a look at those. I'll have a read through.
Fantastic. And, I think the final point to touch on is the common confusion between the two Terraform modules that have been around. So there's the CAF Terraform Landing Zones module and the Azure Landing Zones Terraform module. We've literally released this at the same time as that other document. So I would invite people to go and have a read of this. And we talk about what the difference between them both are, and which we would suggest from an Azure Landing Zones perspective. So highly recommend people go and give this a read as well. And we've also updated these child pages on the left as well. So go and check those out. But anyway, we're here to talk about Bicep, right? So let's get into that. So we have released the Azure Landing Zones Bicep repo. So aka.ams/ALZ/Bicep will get you there.
I'll put all the links below, so all the links will be in the description below. Of course they will, so everybody can grab them.
Fantastic, and I'll make sure we get them all good in there. So as you can see, we have this repo, right? And this helps you build the Azure Landing Zones architecture using Bicep. And we are currently in public preview. Now, this isn't doesn't really mean anything apart from it helps people understand of what stage in the development journey we're in on this. And that effectively means that until we go V1 on here, we're currently at V0.6.0. Until we go V1, you can expect some breaking changes, but we will document those as we go. And as you can see here, we changed one of the VNet peering modules. We renamed it to align earlier in the week. And we give you, these are the things you might need to change and update if you're pulling everything as the latest. But generally, people will just clone this once and off they go from there. And we'll talk about how to consume it in a second. But that's just where we are today. But this will help you deploy the Azure Landing Zones architecture. So if you scroll down here, we've got all of this information around what's in our wiki. If we start our deployment flow, I think this is a good place to start. So one of the reasons we created Azure Landing Zones, and I think, or Azure Landing Zones Bicep, was a customer demand, right? Bicep was fairly new and people going, hey, where's the Bicep version of this? The other reason was that the portal experience that we had today and we spoke about is very much it's not customizable, right? It's you take it as it is. You pass in the various parameters that we do allow you to pass in, like what region, email addresses, what subscriptions go where, but you can't really customize things like the naming or anything like that. It's very much you're taking it as we've said it. You can pass in a prefix and that's about it. Sure. So we heard loud and clear from customers that they were like, hey, we also might not want to do all of that in one go. Like we might want to do the management groups and some subscription placement. But we don't want the networking right now. We've got another hub with an express route, and we need to work out how we're going to migrate between those. So we heard loud and clear from customers, partners, that we need to break this up into some more modular deployments for them, so that they can, basically do it at their own pace. But obviously, with that comes great responsibility, as I say. Like, the pleasure of the Accelerator experience is you don't have to worry about which order to do things in, and everything happens in the right order. But now that we've broken everything into individual modules, so there's a management groups module, and there's a couple of policy modules, and there's a hub networking module, and there's a module to do RBAC. With that, you need to ensure you do things in the correct order. Otherwise, you're going to get a failed deployment, right? Because you might be looking for a policy definition that you haven't deployed yet, or you might be trying to look for a management group you haven't deployed yet. So we provide some really high-level guidance here about, hey, these are the modules that you need to use, and this is the order that you need to deploy them in. And then below, we have links off to each of the documentation for each of the modules. So let's just dive into one of these. Let's look at the management groups module for an example.
Cool.
Go on, John, sorry.
No, I was just saying cool. Yeah, no, let's go for it.
So if we dive into this, we've been really stringent, right? So when we started this, every module should have this consistent documentation across it. So you should get an understanding of what it's going to do, what it's going to deploy, and you'll notice that this is the exact same architecture that we talk about in the Accelerator, and that's a key goal for all of our implementation options, right? We aim for parity across all of the implementation options. So Terraform should deliver you the same as Bicep. Bicep should deliver you the same as the portal experience. Now, there may be some lag between those because obviously they move at different paces and development cycles, but that is the intention and the goal. And then we list out the parameters that you need to provide and whether they're required and what examples look like and what outputs you're going to get. Some deployment instructions, so whether you're a CLI fan or a PowerShell fan. And obviously, we also support today Azure Mooncake or Azure China, because we have quite a lot of users out there. So there's some slight differences in some of the APIs or some of the supported options. So in some of the modules, you need to do something slightly different, but not all of them. So we provide it for both. And we give you an example of what you can expect to see at the end, and the Bicep visualizer of this is what it's going to deploy. So fairly comprehensive documentation that should help you get started. And then obviously everything's here. So we can look at this management groups module for an example, and I'll zoom in a little bit more. But as you can see, it's been written in a way. And first off, for you developers out there, yes, we are using the Hungarian notation for our naming of parameters, variables, resources, and all symbolic names. This was quite a heated debate point internally because they're like, well, are you stuck in the 70s? Are you stuck in the 80s? Like, what's going on here? We did this to make it easier to recognize, where things are in a template. Now, obviously, Visual Studio Code will help you massively. But if you're looking at it through a text editor or GitHub, you want to go, well, where's that used, right? And if you're scrolling down here and you just see something called top-level management group prefix, you don't know whether that's a parameter, a variable, an output, another resource. So by prefixing stuff with par and var and res, we've just broken that down. And it's really been written with the intention of users who are newer to infrastructure as code that want to see some reference material that they can take, customize, and then use to deploy the environment they want. They absolutely can. But by default, we're going to deploy the Azure Landing Zones architecture for you. So to your point earlier, to your point earlier, John, around corp and online, if you want to change it, change it. Like that's it, But be aware that there be dragons, right? Because there are dependencies built on that architecture. So if you change like the management group hierarchy, you might need to update this in a few more places. But if you're using Visual Studio Code, you can do a find and replace and work out where those other places are. And we talk around this in the documentation around, if you do customize this, these are the places to look out for it, especially around policy assignments when you're changing management group hierarchies, because by default, we make a load of policy assignments and expect management group names to exist that may not.
I guess, Jack, is that a point to maybe just briefly touch upon the kinds of customers that might want to use this? Because, of course, if you work for, a service provider where you're kind of deploying management group structures to multiple different customers, then it kind of makes sense to have it all as infrastructure as code with your naming conventions that you can easily tweak, maybe dependent on, if you do tweak them per customer, that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
if you're an individual business that is looking to deploy this for yourselves, I guess this is the kind of thing that you're going to maybe modify and run once and potentially not touch it for a long time, if ever again.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think you talk about that in a, you call out a good point, and this is something we actually heard from a bit of feedback. So we created this consumer guide in the wiki, and we talk about how you can consume it and the ways it can be consumed. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, the persona that this is aimed at is, those newer people who are looking to adopt infrastructure as code, maybe already have a landing zone deployed, maybe don't, but they go, do you know what? If we're going to do this, we're going to do this in infrastructure as code. We don't want to use Terraform because we've got no Terraform skills. We want to stay Azure native because we're all in on Azure. So they go, well, okay, Bicep seems like the logical next step because it's being pushed, and that is the future of ARM templates and Azure infrastructure as code. And it's built for that exact reason, right? People can clone this, as we say, fork it and clone it, download a zip, and then go customizing it, right? Like, we expect you to customize these things to suit your needs. If you want to change corporate online to public and private, or internal and external, whatever you want to do, go wild. But as you say, right, you may never touch this again. So, but we're giving you that building block of, I haven't got to build everything from scratch because I want to deviate just some names. You've got a good starting place and stuff that works, because we test all these modules before we release them. There's test pipelines that you can see. So you can have faith that you're going to get what you expect. But we absolutely expect you to go and change bits in here. It's not been written in a way that, I think this is a good point, actually. A lot of people ask, why don't you make the template super flexible? Like the Terraform module, it's very flexible. It's a matter of how, not if, it can support the customization. But with great flexibility becomes very complex nested objects and arrays and all of these sort of things that you need to know about. And in Bicep today, there's not support for schema validation and stuff like that, in terms of, have you got the right amount of objects or right amount of keys in that object, whereas in Terraform we do. So we've tried to keep things fairly native and fairly high level parameters, because we can validate and make sure that the values you're passing in are correct.
That makes a lot.
And the approach we've taken.
No, I was going to say there, Jack, and one of the kind of observations I've made is with the Terraform modules, you're right, you can highly customize that, but then it's almost like you need those skills internally to do that, and you need somebody that understands that. So now all of a sudden you're kind of abstracting potentially complexity away from maybe not knowing how to do something in the portal, to now you need to do it in code, and so you're kind of moving the complexity almost. So it's almost like, that's great, you can do it one way, but why didn't you just do it the other way? And I think that's where a lot of this debate, I suppose, comes from, is that where does that complexity need to lie? And we're trying to address potentially too many things in one product. Maybe, I don't know. It's almost like complexity versus flexibility versus skills to do this. So yeah, it's very tenuous ground, I suppose, at the moment, especially when things are in public preview and things are changing so rapidly. You kind of got to keep up to speed with those changes, and so it's an interesting landscape at the moment, I think, Jack, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people with Terraform skills are likely have been doing it for multiple years, and have been doing it across other clouds, and a bit more used to how modules may be composed and how they consume them and what to expect. And the language has, had a bit of a head start, right? It's been going for way longer than Bicep has, but Bicep is catching up, right? Don't be there, but they also are very different. They're not fair to compare. Is my argument on this, my personal opinion, that Terraform obviously has its external state, and it can therefore be a bit cleverer in terms of it knows when it needs to delete and remove things, which ARM and Bicep today, they can't support deletion of resources and move of resources. I always use this example of, if you've got a policy assignment at, say, Contoso, your top level management group, and you go, do you know what, we should put that on landing zones instead. In Bicep, you can make that change and change the policy assignment from, Contoso to landing zones. All that's going to happen is that a policy is going to get deployed to landing zones, or assigned to landing zones, but the one on Contoso is going to get left behind and still be there because it's not aware that it works like that. And complete mode deployments versus incremental mode deployments. Obviously, people will say just use complete mode. Absolutely, but it is not supported at these higher scopes where we play with Azure landing zones. So these are things that are being worked on.
I was going to say, I suppose if you do that as well, you could potentially break something major if you're on a production system, and you're probably not going to want to try and do that, especially when you've got a product that's in, like a development stage or public preview stage itself. So, yeah, you'd be a braver person than I would anyway, Jack, if you were going to try that on a customer deployment. But
yeah, absolutely. And and I think that one thing to call out here, right? We use the term public preview for Azure Landing Zones Bicep. They are absolutely production ready, right? You can go and use these. They do deploy the architecture. We have plenty of customers using them today. Some big names that obviously I cannot share, but know this is being used. But it's being taken as maybe verbatim in places. But then they go, do you know what? I like your hub networking module, but I'm going to write my own networking because I can do that. And they go and write their own, and that's cool. I'm fine with that. We're there to accelerate you and help you get there faster without having to reinvent the wheel every time.
You've got the options there, haven't you? At the end,
exactly.
You've got the options. Yeah, and when you were showing the flow there, I mean that was one of the first things that jumped out to me was all of a sudden now we can deploy not just the management group structure, but then the policies, the policy definitions, and then the policy assignments, and I guess we're going to touch on a few of those areas now, Jack, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've got obviously all this documentation here. Lots of interesting information. We support all of the networking options as well. So we support hub and spoke and virtual WAN already. So that's all there. So there isn't any feature gap in terms of what we can do in the Azure Landing Zone Accelerator. All of them are pretty much in parity at the moment. So we're in a happy place, right, with V2 of the module going out yesterday for Terraform. And also, I think, just to call out, if you're looking for sample pipelines and GitHub Actions, and you're a bit more mature and you want that, we have examples here of how you can stitch this all together. And look out for on the roadmap, we're going to be creating another repo called the ALZ Bicep Accelerator that you'll be able to just clone, and it'll have production ready GitHub Actions and Azure DevOps pipelines already built that are more production ready, instead of these are very built to help you understand and learn how to do it rather than be production ready. They'll certainly deploy it for you, but it wouldn't be the best way of doing it potentially. So that's coming in the future. So let's have a look at an environment, right? So here's my tenant, and as you can see, it's empty. There's nothing in here, no tricks, no magic, and we're looking at our management groups. So let's try and consume the repo, right? So if we looked at the consumer guide, the first thing it's going to tell us to do is clone the repository. Okay, well, let's go and clone the repository. And I'll use Cloud Shell because that will help us keep it all nice and tidy. So let's just copy the link to the repo, and let's just clone this into here. So git clone and paste that in there. And we're going to get all of this stuff in a folder. So if we now look inside of here, we've got an ALZ Bicep folder. So let's go into there. Great. And then if we just do a quick ls, we can see we've got all the folders and bits and pieces that we would expect to see as per the repo. So let's go for management groups, right? Obviously, that's where we start. That's what deployment flow tells us to do. So if we look here, we've got management groups first, and then custom policy definitions, custom RBAC role definitions. And then what we'll do is we'll skip along because some of these resources take a little bit longer to deploy. We'll skip along to policy assignments because that's really the beating heart of Azure Landing Zones, right? So we'll show those things off. So let's scroll down. So number one, we can see in the table, cool, I need to go to this link here. So we'll go there. And it's saying, let's have a look through here and see what the deployment instructions are. So I want my management groups and I'm cool with the names. I can pass in an example, but I'll leave the defaults for now. So let's go down here and choose my tool of choice. So I'll use your CLI. And I'm just going to copy and paste these commands, right? I'm just going to take them verbatim as they are. But because I've cloned that repo, you can take this. So as long as we say here, we assume you've downloaded or cloned the Git repo as is and are in the root of that repository. So that's exactly what we've done here.
Yeah, that's cool. I think it's just a case, like you say, that if you wanted to manipulate those for your own naming conventions, then go for it. But yeah, I think it's a good idea to stick with what you got on there, isn't it? Yeah. Good.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to change, you still have the same flexibility as you have in the Terraform and the portal experience. So if you want to change that prefix from ALZ to John, you can absolutely do that. But if you want to go past that and you don't want it to be called corporate online, as our example that we've used, then you need to go and change that in the Bicep file. But there's nothing stopping you doing that. So let's just copy and paste this command in as is. So let's just go there. Right, so we're doing a tenant level deployment operation. So we need to have obviously the relevant permissions set up, and we talk about that in the documentation anyway. And then we're calling the management groups module, and we're passing in a parameters file. So whilst we kick this off, we're going to have a look at those files. So let's just do that. And then if we go make sure that actually starts, this is also cool to call out. You'll see a lot of these. This is because we're using the linting function in Bicep to basically enforce some code hygiene standards. So it's just saying, I've spotted a custom Bicep config file in here. And it's just part of the Bicep compiler when it does that. So it's nothing to worry about. It's completely normal, but it's just letting you know that it's found a custom file. And if I go back to the repo, I'll show you that file, this bicep config.json. It basically controls the linter rules for all of the Bicep. So, shouldn't use an admin username that's literal, shouldn't have unused parameters, shouldn't have unused vars. But because we've set this option here to verbose, you see them when you run them. So if you don't want them, you can change that to don't or false effectively. And you won't see them. But this happens as part of our automation pipelines when we commit new code via pull requests. Basically, we check that if somebody's done an external contribution or one of us, if we don't comply with our own Bicep linter rules, we're not going to accept the PR in until it's changed. So this is how we start enforcing that. So it just is a way that we do our unit testing effectively.
Cool. Yeah, got you.
And then if we were to, look in this parameters file, it's again, this is a Bicep thing, not an ALZ Bicep thing, where we're still having to use ARM template style parameters files. But the product team are working on it, and I've had some conversations on this, and they know it's probably the easiest thing I can say, and it's something they do want to get sorted.
It's like you say, it's being worked on. There's lots of things that are being incremented over time, yeah. But for now, you've got to use an ARM style, a JSON formatted.
Absolutely. Or you could pass it in at the pipeline, right? So you could, if you're using PowerShell or the Azure CLI, you could pass it in there, and that stuff still applies. But as you can see, pass in the prefix, the display name, and the telemetry. So we have some telemetry that we use to see how they're getting used. We detail this all in the platform. We know nothing about your deployment. We literally know that you've deployed that module. That's all we know. But it just helps us keep it, are these being used? Are they not being used? Which ones do we need to focus on? And if you do want to disable that, you can just set that to true, and we won't know anything. So, completely open and honest, and it's detailed in the wiki as well. Yeah. So that's all that's in there. And, we've looked at this management groups template before, but as you can see, passing in these 3 parameters, and then we're getting through it, and we've got, level 1, our top level, then we've got our second level management groups, and then we have our third level management groups, but all very clearly laid out. And if you want to go and customize any of these, customize it first and then run your deployment, and you'll get your output as you desire.
So Jack, a quick question. On each of the modules, so that's the management group structure. Is there likely to be any correlation between any variables or parameters between modules, or are they isolated, unique modules that can be maintained and managed as individual things?
So you can, that's a great question. You can definitely manage them as individual things, but we've tried to keep parameter names consistent where they should be consistent. So like the top level management group prefix, we ask for that consistently across all of the modules that require it. Just to make sure that, if you've got a massive parameter file or you're doing something a bit clever in a CI/CD pipeline, you've only got to define each parameter once, and you haven't got to have, the same thing declared twice with 2 different names.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, great.
So yeah, we're trying to, and if anybody does spot anything, because a lot of people have contributed to this project so far. I think we've had a number of external community contributors as well. So, really welcome people to contribute if they want to, and work with the team. If you spot something, raise an issue, right? Raise a bug. We have all these issue templates here. Oh, I'm not actually logged into my GitHub account, but that's why it won't let me. But we have a load of issue templates there. That's like a feature request or just a general question or a bug report. Feel free to raise them and log them, and we'll get back to you pretty quickly. Like this one that was raised yesterday by a customer, I've already developed the fix and the enhancement for it, and I'll be rolling that out next week when I've finish with this.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, no, good to keep on top. So that's now finished. So we can see that we've got all of this and all of our outputs are here. And if we go back to our management groups view and do a refresh, here's our hierarchy. So if I expand all of these, and you'll see Azure landing zones, all deployed from code, and you've not had to really do much. And if you wanted to change them, you absolutely could.
Cool.
There's no problems with that. So now we've got that, we can probably move back to our deployment flow and see what was next. So I think it was the custom policy definitions from memory. Hopefully I remember it, being the one that writes a lot of this. So custom policy definitions. Let's go and grab that module. And as you can see, like what we were talking around there, like target management group ID. So this is giving you a bit of flexibility, right? So say you're a brownfield customer or a customer that's already got a management group hierarchy, and you've seen Azure landing zones, but you're not interested. You just want to take the policies as they are. You just want the policy part of Azure landing zones. You don't want potentially the management groups. You could just pass in the management group ID that exists, and you can get all the policy definitions. We're not going to say it has to be the ALZ hierarchy. It's up to you, right? It's definitely our recommendation, but it's a choice.
Got you.
Cool. And as we call out a few things here, like if you're going to go and change these, so if you want to make changes to the default policy assignments, then you need to be aware of a few things. But there's we've tried to call out as many places as possible to help people understand. So I would fully recommend people read the documentation because we put a lot of time into that to make sure that it helps you out. So let's go down here and we'll just copy this verbatim again. We just need to target this time a management group and the management group that we need to target. So the ALZ one that we've deployed because we've kept it default.
Right. Yeah.
So, and in all of the examples, they're all built using sort of the same ALZ example. So you could take all of the example code and run them, and you'd get the output.
Yes. Yeah. Got you.
So
and it's a great way to it's a great way to work your way through it as well, isn't it? Run it once, look at what's going to be deployed, how it's going to be deployed, and you can make the decisions if you need to. What do you want to modify? So.
Absolutely. What I will say, cleaning up is always a good fun of an Azure landing zones deployment. Yes. It's not always easy. I'll share a sneak peek into something that I've written in my spare time, which I have tons of, obviously. Let's go into
subscription dash delete.
Well, it's a little bit
tenant
more,
recreate.
Yeah. It's a little bit more harsh than that, and I would strongly recommend that you understand what this is doing. Hence why it's buried, and I haven't advertised this much. But I have this wipe ESLZ AZ tenant command, right? Okay, and hopefully this gives you a clue that it's quite dangerous. Use with extreme caution. But what it effectively does, it will target a management group. So if we could now set this at ALZ, and it will scan everything beneath that. So if you've got subscriptions beneath that, it will pick them up. It will move them back to the tenant root, and then it will start wiping everything out. But it will also remove all of the resources that are in those subscriptions, and also wipe all of the ARM deployments as well. So it's very, very dangerous, but it's great for demo purposes. And if you're comfortable with it, it's that dangerous that I've introduced a sanity check feature. So if you run it, it goes, I'm going to delete all of this stuff. Are you really sure? Like, now type in this number. And if you don't get it right, it won't run. But it's there if you want it. So we can leave a link to this if people want it. But
that's it's good. I mean, it's a valid thing. As you can see, I was chuckling there because I've had that experience on more than one occasion where you think, I want to run this again, but this is going to take me a while. That's a great little, PowerShell script. But yeah,
it's all there, and some examples, and like even to see the script, you ensure you have read, and then you click here, and then boom, here's the script. So
I think you've done enough there, Jack, to kind of point out the fact that use with extreme caution. Don't run this on a production environment.
Absolutely. So our policy definitions are running. So let's just have a quick look at our policy definitions. So in here. Yeah. It's quite a simple.
I was going to ask now. So is this the part that you're saying you want to correlate between the other mechanisms? So the custom policy that deploys with the other modules, and so how far are you with that in the Bicep architecture?
So we are at complete parity across all three implementations with
Cool.
all of the policies that happen, right? Being it's one of the most important parts of Azure landing zones, it was one of the things we focused on very early. And the way we do that is that the enterprise scale repo, so the actual upstream repo, so the one with the portal experience, and I'll just go there very quickly. This one here, we actually use this as our source of truth. So everything in here is our source of truth. So in the ALZ ARM folder, inside management groups, inside policy definitions, there is this policies.json file, right? And it's like 32,000 lines of policies. We are going to be working on this to try and make that smaller and more individual files to make it easier to contribute. But no, it exists for reasons in the platform that we've tried to basically had to work around, that we're also working with the engineering team to try and sort. But it exists to ensure successful deployment. So we know it's bad, but it is there for a reason. But what we actually do into the Bicep repo and the Terraform repo is we have some automation that runs. So there is a GitHub action called update policy library. And what happens is once a day, so as you can see, it ran 10 hours ago and it runs every day. It basically runs a PowerShell script that the Kevin, who writes the Terraform module, developed, that basically goes and reads this ALZ ARM policies file, pulls it into individual files and checks for any changes. And if there are, it will create a new PR and we can then merge that into our process.
That's very cool.
Sure they're up to date.
Very cool. So it's nice to see that under the hood slightly, that's what you're doing there. Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
Yeah, we want to keep it up to date, right? We don't want customers to have to force to make a decision on what tool they're going to use because one of them's more up to date than the other. That's not fair.
Well, I mean, it's just great to know that we've got a good set of custom policies because it's always the case. Yeah, you've got those built-in policies that you can manage and manipulate. But as time has gone on, there'd be some really cool, current, best practice kind of things that you might want to put in. And for me, that's where I've always looked to some of those custom policies because they're good starting points. Absolutely
right. They're things that we commonly see that customers need. So if they're not going to be provided as built-in, let's help everybody out and give them to you. But what you then want happens is we put them in this lib folder inside the definitions folder, and then in the policy definitions, and you'll see that all of these are all of the individual policies that are inside of that massive policies.json file. So we split them out in Bicep, and we do exactly the same in the Terraform world as well. So if we were to open up these, you'll see it's just a normal JSON template that you can take and here's the policy rule. That's all there for you to just use and see.
Cool.
But inside of the module, what we then do is something very clever. And we're working quite closely with the policy team on this. Sorry, not the Bicep team to get this right. But you have to make one deployment. But as you'll see, we're using this JSON load text content function, which is only available in Bicep. It's not available in ARM. Okay. And we basically say, go and load this file and encode it in JSON, right? Even though it's a JSON file, just make sure it is a JSON file and encode it.
Yeah.
But what that then allows us to do is basically take all of these files in a more manageable way. So if you don't want one policy, you can delete this. You don't have to have it. If you want to add your own, you can just put it in the folder path, add it in here with its name, and off it will go, right? So
you don't have to delete that fashion. You're not having to delete that JSON file from the repo. You can just manage it in code, and you can add in code. Yeah,
exactly. And then if we get all the way through these policies, because you'll see that it's quite a beast, and we also do it for policy set definitions as well. Right at the bottom, when we get to the resource deployments, you'll see that we literally have 2 resource deployments that use a loop. So for every policy in this array, go and deploy the definition, and then for every policy set in the array of policy sets, go and deploy it. So you haven't got anything complex to manage. You just manage the variables up the top and the files.
Very cool.
And off you go.
Yeah. So that's what's happening now, effectively. This is the policy definitions, isn't it? Yes. So.
Correct. So as you can see, that's finished. And if we now go into the management group structure and we targeted our ALZ management group, we go in here and go into policy. And then if we go under definitions,
wait for the 3 dots. I was going to say, Jack, this area. I mean, only time permitted now. We're coming up quite well, I know you've got some meetings very soon, but this would be a cool area maybe to explore in a bit more detail, and maybe I'll take a look at that as well outside of this video. But yeah,
Definitely.
there they all are. There they all are.
But as you'll see, here they all are. They're all here, and that's that. And if very quickly, I think that the last piece of this puzzle, and I know we're close on time, but I think this is an important one to cover. We do exactly the same on the policy front for the assignments. So you'll see there's an assignments folder, and there's a lib folder again. And inside here, there's JSON files for all of the policies that we assign by default. And you can see what's in here. But what you can do, this module that we've written for policy assignments is written in a pretty flexible way. Let me go back to the actual right place. So you can pass in the parameters, and you can use this to assign any policy by default. So it doesn't have to be using the ones that we provided as part of ALZ. Okay. You don't even have to be using JSON files to manage it, because we realize that not some customers won't want to do that. So if we open up the module itself, you'll see that there's a load of parameters. But if I get into the actual policy assignment, you can just pass in the parameters for all of the bits that it is. So for the policy rule, and it'll handle it. Now, also the nice thing that we do here is, obviously, me and you being, experienced users of the platform, some policy assignments and effects require an identity and an RBAC assignment for them to work, like a deploy if not exist or modify. In code, you have to do that yourself manually, right? If you do it in the portal, it all happens automatically and you don't know about it. But in code, in Terraform or in Bicep or in ARM, you have to do that yourself. We basically if you set the type here to system assigned or user assigned, we will trigger the RBAC assignment. So we basically have a condition on here that says if the policy identity is system assigned, go and make this assignment as well. So we basically give you all the flexibility so that you only have to do one deployment to get whatever policy assigned done in one go, not have to do, the policy and then have to go and do RBAC and then assignments. We'll handle that all for you as part of this.
With you. Okay. No, very cool. Yeah, very clever. Yeah, I like that.
And what's the last thing to call out in here? So you may be wondering, do I have to do that for all of the policies that you do in ALZ by default? Like, what happens if I just want ALZ verbatim, right? I've drunk the Kool-Aid and I just want Azure landing zones. Well, we have this ALZ defaults module that we link to in the deployment flow. And this one is a more opinionated one where we basically use that policy assignments module that I've just showed you multiple times to deploy the policies that we would assign by default. So you can see we're calling a module now, but it's that same policy assignments module. And we're just passing in the relevant parameters using JSON files.
I must have missed something then, Jack. Did you run that assignment module as well at the same time then, or was that just the definitions you pulled in?
It was just the definitions, but I haven't run the assignments. But we could run this module very quickly.
Yeah. No, I mean we got 5 minutes or so now, but I know you've got a call fairly soon. But so yeah, I mean that's it. It'll be a case of, so that'll be the standard kind of assignments across that management group structure, I'm assuming, that you would have as the default that you just showed us. Yeah?
Exactly.
With you. No, that makes a lot of sense.
If you do customize it, you customize Corp and Online, you need to be aware that you need to probably go and amend some bits in this file.
Yeah, with you on that. Yeah, and I guess maybe those kind of customizations. I mean, I'm only speaking from my experience, but a lot of customers, because I deal with lots of different customers. 9 times out of 10, it's like, I want to change that name, and then it's like, okay, well, we can do that, and it's naming conventions, and it's like I say, tongue in cheek, it's always a talking point. Yeah, it's one of those things. But yeah, I mean, it's just cool that we can call it out now with the Bicep configuration, and it's cool to see, to be honest, Jack. It's yeah, it's great. I mean, it's coming a long way in quite a short space of time, to be honest.
Absolutely, and that's our intention. We want to accelerate customers. We want to help them get there as fast as possible, so they can worry about the workloads and the business value of these things, rather than worrying about what policies do I need and all this stuff. We're there to help you get accelerated. All of these are just ARM deployments as well, so we can go into one of these and just have a look. So this is the one that we're currently running, the default policy assignments. We'll probably see a number of things in here when my ARM kicks into life. There you go. So it's doing assignment now at various scopes, but it will kick off and go and do all of these, and that's it. You're done. Here you go. Here's all the policy assignments that are happening and all the various RBAC assignments that need to happen if they need to happen. You haven't got to worry about that.
No, it's awesome, Jack. So I mean, in terms of only very briefly on the other modules potentially that are coming. I guess this is a work in progress, and watch this space and watch how these Bicep modules grow now over the coming months and years, I guess, Jack, yeah?
Yeah, and our intention is to try and make this GA and get all of the, get it, find any bugs that potentially are there. Touch wood, we have had no bug that has been a showstopper today. We've only had very minor things like, you're deploying an additional public IP and we don't need to. Okay, yep, cool, small typo,
Yeah.
we'll go and fix it. There is complete feature parity for the Azure landing zones set, so there is a module for everything you need. So there should be no gap. I would encourage you to go and use it. And as I said, lots of customers are using this today already. So feel safe in the knowledge that you can use this. And at the end of the day, it's just a Bicep deployment. So, support will still be there to support you, and we're there on the issues if you need us.
No, and I mean, just to echo that, because I know we've spoken a few times, and it's great to see that you're open to those issues being submitted, and I'm hopefully people will get. Well, I'm certainly going to take a look at it now when I get. It's on that to-do list, Jack. That never-ending to-do list. I will
How long's yours?
I'm not going there. I've got a to-do list that sorts out which to-do list I need to be working on. I think is look at to-do list number 3. No, I joke, but. Jack, it's been awesome. I mean, are there any last bits and pieces you want to finish off with, or do you think we're pretty much there for the demo? Because that was great.
No, all I would say is we really want to hear from customers on all the things at Azure Landing Zone. So if you've got ideas, raise issues on the relevant repo. And if it's on the wrong repo, don't worry. We'll move it about and put it in the right place. That's what we're there to do. But we really want to hear from customers about what they like, what they don't like, what they'd like to see added. If you've got a custom policy you think would be valuable to others, we want to hear about it. Feel free to get in touch. Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever. We're all very open and comfortable to have conversations with you guys.
No, that's perfect, Jack. Well, nothing more to say than thank you for joining me and taking me through that, because I certainly learned a lot there about the Azure landing zones with Bicep. And everybody go out and have a look and feed it back to the team there. So thanks for being an awesome guest again, Jack, and thanks a lot for taking me through that. That was brilliant.
Never a problem. Pleasure. And hopefully we'll speak again soon, John.
No, absolutely we will. Take care for now, Jack, and I'll see you very soon.